Welcome to this video, dear learners. In today's video, we'll be talking about transformations in English. Okay, so we have a few words here that we normally use when doing transformations or what we call rewrites. Okay, so our first word here is hardly. Second word is scarcely, no sooner, barely, and as soon as. Okay, so all these words here above, they are used to talk about two separate events. Okay, two separate events that are happening one after the other. Okay, one after the other. So these events will happen at the same place, okay, or the same location, but one event is happening after the other. Okay, or as soon as this event is happening, another event on the other side is happening. Okay, so let's have an example. As soon as I reached the station, the train arrived. Okay, so meaning there are two events. Okay, upon you reaching the station, and then the train arrived. Okay, so to connect these words, okay, we can transform the word. As soon as I reach the station, you can transform the whole sentence using hardly, scarcely, no sooner, and barely. Okay, but then there are some rules that you have to know. Okay, so for example, hardly, whenever you use the word hardly, okay, so you're given two events, okay, and you want to transform the sentence using the word hardly. Always the word hardly will be followed by hard. Okay, the word hardly will be followed by hard. That's the same thing applies with scarcely. The word scarcely will be followed by hard. Okay, the same thing applies for barely. Okay, barely will be followed also by hard. Okay, hard. Okay, hardly, hard, scarcely, hard, barely, hard. Okay, so always these words, they go together with the hard. Now, when you want to connect these two words, these two sentences, you are trying to connect two events. Okay, so the connection, whenever you use either hardly, scarcely, and barely, the connection is always when. Okay, because these words, they mean exactly the same thing. Okay, these words mean exactly the same thing. Barely, scarcely, and hardly. Okay, hardly, scarcely, and barely, they mean exactly the same thing and are always used with past perfect tenses, and we'll see that. Okay, so when connecting the two sentences, our connection is when. Okay, our connection is what? Is when. Okay, so let's look at an example here. As soon as I reached the station, the train arrived. Okay, begin the sentence using hardly. Okay, so I said hardly. Immediately after hardly, what follows is hard. Okay, so you're going to start, begin hardly, you write hard, hardly, hard. Okay, so this is the first thing to do, hardly, hard. Then now you want to transform this sentence, okay, using hardly, hard. So this hardly, hard will replace this first statement, as soon as. Hardly, hard will be replaced by as soon as. Okay, so this as soon as has been replaced by hardly, hard. So we are going to begin from here. Hardly had I reached. Hardly had I reached the station. Okay, so as soon as uses a comma to connect the sentences, but when we use hardly had, this comma you see will be replaced by when. Okay, since we said that when is the connection. Okay, hardly, scarcely, and barely both use when to connect. So this comma which was connecting the two sentences here will be replaced with when. So hardly had I reached the station. Okay, hardly had I reached the station when. Okay, hardly had I reached the station when. okay, the train, when the train arrived. Okay, nothing has changed here. Hardly had I reached the station when the train arrived. Okay, so first thing, hardly goes with had. That's the first thing we did. Then the statement hardly had replaces as soon as. Okay, this we maintained it. I reached the station, but the comma here has been replaced with what? When. Okay, so that's how you use the word hardly. So if you use the word scarcely, okay, let's transform the same question using the word scarcely. So scarcely, again, after scarcely, what follows is hard. Scarcely hard, okay. So scarcely hard will replace as soon as. You maintain I reached the station. I reached the station. Okay, again the comma here will be replaced. Scarcely also, the connection is when. Scarcely had I reached the station when the train arrived. So scarcely and hardly used in this actually the same way, okay, because they mean the same thing. Same with barely, okay, so barely had. So barely had replaces as soon as. I reached the station, the train arrived, okay, so we maintain I reached the station. Comma again replaced by when. Barely had I reached the station when the train arrived. Okay, so here the take-home message for scarcely, barely and hardly is that after you use these words, what should follow is hard. Okay, that's what we look at when marking hard. And then the connection now, what is connecting these two events is when. Okay, when connects the two events. So event number one is I reached the station. That is event number one. Event number two is the train arrived. Okay, so these two events are happening together, but one after the other. So the first event is you reaching the station, and then the next event is the train arriving. Okay, so hardly had goes with the first event, and then when goes with the second event. So hardly had the first event, I reached the station, when the train arrived. Okay, I hope that clears everything. Okay, so this is how you use hardly, scarcely, or barely. Okay, so if you have any question, please leave it on the comment section or contact me on my number there on the channel. Okay, so hardly had I reached the station when the train arrived. Scarcely had I reached the station when the train arrived. Barely had I reached the station when the train arrived. So you notice that the words here, hardly, scarcely, and barely, are used in actually the same ways. This is because they mean the same thing. Okay, so we're done with hardly, scarcely, and barely. Let's look at no sooner. Okay, so no sooner, this is used to indicate past tense, but at the same time also it is used to also indicate two events that are happening one after the other. Okay, but usually here the events are in past tense. Okay, again, no sooner goes with had. Okay, it goes with had, but the connection, okay, what you use to connect those two events, you use than and not when. Okay, you use what? Than. Okay, you use than. Let's look at an example. So this example here says, as soon as I reached home, they welcomed me. So notice here the sentence is past tense. Okay, so begin it with the no sooner. Okay, no sooner. So no sooner, immediately no sooner will go with had. Okay, no sooner had. Okay, so this no sooner had is going to replace as soon as. Okay, as soon as, but we maintain the I reached home. Okay, no sooner had I. Okay, no sooner had I reached home. Okay, no sooner had I reached home. This comma again will be replaced by than. Okay, the comma will be replaced by than. No sooner had I reached home, okay, than they welcomed me. Okay, so here you notice how different it is with the hardly and scarcely. Here we are connecting using the word than. Okay, so this is the first event, event number 1. This is the second event, being welcomed. So no sooner had connects the first event, and then than connects the second what event. So no sooner had I reached home than they welcomed me. Okay, let's look at another example. Okay, in this example we have she burst into tears as soon as she met her mother. Okay, so let's look at now which one is the first event here and which one is the second event. That's the first thing. Do first notice which one is the first event and which one is the second event. So she burst into tears as soon as she met her mother, meaning which one happened first here. Okay, she burst into tears as soon as she met her mother. Which one happened first? Okay, so the one that happened first here is that she met her mother. Okay, this is the first event. She met her mother. Then as soon as she met her mother, she burst into tears. This is the second event. So she burst into tears as soon as she met her mother. Okay, meaning the first event is her meeting her mother. Then she burst into tears. Okay, and once you've recognized the first event and the second event, you now know that okay, no sooner had connects the first event. So no sooner will go with the first event. Okay, no sooner had she met her mother. No sooner had she met her mother. So to get the second event, when you use no sooner, you always use what? Than. No sooner had she met her mother than she burst into tears. Okay, so here we've used the word than to connect than. So remember, just the take-home message here, I'll write it here. No sooner had connects the first event, or event number 1. Then we'll connect the second event. So no sooner connects the first event, which was this one, the first event, and then connects the second event. Okay, so here always try to look at the question nicely and say which event happened first. She burst into tears as soon as she met her mother. So this means that she met her mother first, and then the second event happened. She burst into tears. So once you've identified the first event, so we've identified the first event is she met her mother. So the first event goes with no sooner had. That's why we started no sooner had. We went to here, we ignored this because it is the